Can you tell me right now, without getting up from where you're sitting, exactly which forest your maple syrup came from? Not the country, not the province. The forest, the sugar bush, the specific stand of trees that gave up their sap so you could pour it on your pancakes Sunday morning. You probably can't. And here's the part that should bother you. You should be able to. Because in Canada, every single drop of pure maple syrup is supposed to be traceable. Every barrel in the Quebec Strategic Reserve has a number. Every producer has a quota. Every shipment that crosses provincial lines is logged. So if you can't trace your bottle back to its origin, there's a reason. And it isn't because the system failed. It's because what's in your bottle might never have come from a tree at all. Let me show you what I mean. Because once you understand how maple syrup actually moves through this country, from the tap to the truck, to the warehouse to the shelf, you'll never look at that amber bottle the same way again. Maple syrup isn't just a breakfast condiment in this country, it's an export economy. Quebec alone produces somewhere around 72% of the entire global supply. And the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers, the PPAQ, controls that supply with the precision of an oil cartel. There's a strategic reserve in Laurierville, the size of several football fields, holding tens of millions of pounds of syrup in metal barrels. It exists to stabilize prices. It also exists because maple syrup, gram for gram, can be worth more than crude oil. And where there's that kind of money, there's fraud. There's the 2012 Great Maple Syrup Heist, when thieves siphoned roughly $18 million worth of syrup out of that reserve over months, replacing it with water so nobody noticed. There's the ongoing smuggling that moves unregulated syrup across the New Brunswick and Vermont borders. There's the corn syrup and flavoring industry that has spent decades trying to look Canadian without ever touching a maple tree. And most of it ends up on your grocery store shelf, dressed up in plaid, wrapped in a leaf logo, sold to you as a piece of your own heritage. Here's the part most Canadians don't realize. The bottle in your fridge with the cabin on the label, the one with the cursive font and the warm amber color glowing through the plastic, might not contain a single molecule of actual maple. It might be high fructose corn syrup with caramel coloring and a flavor. Compound called sotalon, the same chemical that gives fenugreek its maple-ish smell. The federal grading system, grade A, golden, amber, dark, and very dark, only applies to pure maple. Everything else is technically called pancake syrup, table syrup, or breakfast topping. And those words are doing an enormous amount of work to hide what you're actually pouring. What this video is going to do is walk you through 9 brands that, in our opinion, you should think very hard about before putting in your cart, and 3 brands that genuinely earn the maple name. We're tracing the supply chain on every single one. Sap to bottle, tree to table. No assumptions. If you've ever stood in the syrup aisle and felt vaguely uncertain about which bottle to grab, this is the video that ends that confusion. Stick with me through the brand list, because the worst offender isn't who you'd guess, and the verification framework at the end will let you check any bottle in any store in under 30 seconds. That's all I'll ask. Let's get into it. Brand 1. Aunt Jemima, now rebranded as Pearl Milling Company. The supply chain trace here is almost comical because there is no supply chain to trace, at least not to a maple tree. The primary ingredient on the back of that bottle is corn syrup, followed by high fructose corn syrup, followed by water, followed by cellulose gum, caramel color, salt, and natural and artificial flavors. There's no sap, there's no producer, there's no Quebec quota. The bottle is filled at industrial facilities, largely in the United States, shipped into Canadian distribution, and placed beside actual maple syrup with similar amber coloring and a similar squeeze design. The translation, in plain language, is that you're paying for thickened corn sugar with a maple-adjacent aroma. The brand has rebranded its imagery in recent years, but the formulation remains essentially what it has been for decades. Verdict from this investigation: avoid if you're shopping for maple. It's a corn product. It should be sold beside the molasses, not beside the syrup. Brand 2. Mrs. Butterworth's. The supply chain story here is even thinner because the brand was literally built around a bottle. Shape: a matronly figure designed to evoke a homemade kitchen. Inside that nostalgic bottle, The first ingredient is corn syrup, followed by high fructose corn syrup, water, cellulose gum, caramel color, salt, sodium benzoate as a preservative, citric acid, and artificial and natural flavors. There is no maple sap involved at any point in the production. The product is manufactured in large industrial batches and distributed across North American grocery chains. Documented complaints note that consumers regularly mistake it for real maple syrup because of its placement on shelves and its amber color. PPAQ doesn't regulate it because it isn't maple. The translation is that you're buying a flavored corn syrup with a friendly bottle. The friendly bottle does not change what's inside. Verdict: avoid for any maple purpose. If you want corn syrup with maple flavoring, at least know that's what you're buying. Brand 3. Log Cabin. The name is doing more heavy lifting than any name in the syrup aisle. The packaging features a rustic wooden cabin, suggesting some kind of handcrafted, woods-based origin. The actual ingredient list begins with corn syrup, water, high fructose corn syrup, cellulose gum, caramel color, salt, natural and artificial maple flavor, sodium benzoate, sodium hexametaphosphate, and citric acid. The supply chain trace ends in industrial corn refineries, not in any sugar bush in Quebec or Vermont. The brand has, at various points in its history, contained small percentages of real maple syrup, but the current formulation in most Canadian retailers is overwhelmingly corn-based. The translation: cabin imagery, no cabin sap. The slow pour you might associate with maple is achieved through cellulose gum, a thickener, not through the natural viscosity of boiled down sap. Verdict: avoid if you believe the cabin. The cabin is marketing, not sourcing. Brand 4. Eggo syrup. This one belongs to the same family as the frozen waffles, which tells you something about the supply chain right away. It's a companion product designed for a breakfast platform, not a maple product designed to honor a Canadian tradition. The ingredient list opens with corn syrup, high fructose corn syrup, water, cellulose gum, caramel color, salt, natural and artificial flavors, sodium hexametaphosphate, sodium benzoate, and phosphoric acid. There's no sap, no producer, no traceable origin in any forest. The brand sits on shelves in Canadian grocery stores beside genuine maple syrup, and the visual design uses that familiar deep amber. The translation is that you're getting a corn-based syrup engineered to pair with a specific frozen waffle, sweet and pourable, but missing the actual maple flavor compounds that come from boiling sap. Verdict: avoid for maple purposes. It's a complementary product to a frozen waffle, not a Canadian heritage food. Brand 5. President's Choice. Now this one's complicated because President's Choice actually does sell some pure maple syrup products under its banner, and those products can be perfectly fine. The issue is the President's Choice pancake syrup line, which sits beside the pure maple in many Loblaws and Real Canadian Superstore locations. The pancake variant lists corn syrup, water, sugar, salt, sodium benzoate, caramel color, and artificial maple flavor. The pure maple variants are a different product entirely, and you have to read the label carefully to tell them apart because the design language is similar. Documented complaints from consumers note that they grab the pancake version assuming it's the maple version. The translation: the brand name is the same. The product inside is fundamentally different. Verdict: avoid the pancake syrup line specifically. The pure maple line under the same brand can be acceptable if you verify the label says pure maple syrup and shows a federal grade. Brand 6. Compliments. This is the Sobeys house brand, and it follows the same dual product pattern. There's a Compliments pancake syrup that's primarily corn syrup based, and there's a Compliments pure maple syrup that's a different product. The pancake version's ingredients list begins with glucose fructose, water, sugar, salt, caramel color, sodium benzoate, and artificial flavor. Glucose fructose is the Canadian labeling term for high fructose corn syrup. The supply chain for that pancake product traces back to corn refineries, not maple producers. The shelf placement frequently puts these two product lines side by side, and the casual shopper grabs whichever has the lower price tag. The translation: the cheaper bottle is cheaper because it doesn't contain maple. That's the whole story. Verdict: avoid the Compliments pancake syrup. Verify the maple version separately. Brand 7, no name. The yellow bottle generic that has lived in Canadian pantries for decades. The no-name pancake syrup is exactly what you'd expect at the price point. Glucose fructose, water, sugar, salt, caramel color, sodium benzoate, and artificial maple flavor. There's no maple sap. There's no Quebec connection. The supply chain runs entirely through industrial sweetener manufacturing. What's worth noting is that no name is at least honest in its branding. The label says pancake syrup, not maple syrup, and the yellow generic packaging makes no nostalgic claims about cabins or grandmothers or sugar bushes. Take a breath here, because this is one of the few brands in the avoid list that isn't pretending to be something. It isn't. It's still not maple. It's still corn-based sweetener with flavoring, but the deception level is lower. Verdict: avoid if you want maple. Acknowledge if you want cheap pancake topping that's at least labeled accurately. Brand 8. Selection. This is the Metro House brand, primarily found in Quebec and Ontario. And here's where the story gets uncomfortable, because Selection sells in the same province where the PPAQ regulates the entire pure maple industry, and yet its pancake syrup line is corn-based. The ingredient list reads glucose fructose, water, sugar, caramel color, salt, sodium benzoate, and artificial flavor. The supply chain traces to corn refineries in Ontario and the United States, not to the sugar bushes within driving distance of the Metro Distribution Center. The translation is that even in the heartland of real maple production, the cheap shelf alternative is corn syrup with brown coloring. Documented complaints note that the bottle design uses imagery that suggests a Quebec heritage that the actual product does not have. Verdict: avoid for maple. The geography of the brand does not match the geography of the ingredients. Brand 9. And here's where this video has to slow down, because this brand earns the climax position. Great Value, the Walmart house brand, runs one of the most aggressive maple-adjacent marketing operations in the Canadian grocery landscape. The Great Value pancake syrup bottle uses a deep amber color, a script-style font, and shelf placement directly beside the pure maple syrups, often at less than a quarter of the price. The ingredient list opens with corn syrup, then high fructose corn syrup, then water, then cellulose gum, then caramel color, then salt, then natural and artificial flavors, then sodium benzoate, then sodium hexametaphosphate, then citric acid, then phosphoric acid. 11 ingredients, none of them maple sap. The supply chain runs through United States bottling facilities, primarily in the American Midwest, and the product is imported into Canadian Walmart distribution. The translation is that you're buying an American industrial corn syrup product, dressed in maple-adjacent visual cues, sold in a country whose national identity includes the maple leaf on its flag. PPAQ has no jurisdiction over it because it isn't maple. The federal grading system doesn't apply because there's no maple to grade. The viscosity that mimics real maple comes from cellulose gum. The color comes from caramel coloring, and the flavor comes from a chemistry lab. In our opinion, this is the brand that most aggressively benefits from consumer confusion. Walmart shoppers, particularly those buying for large families on tight budgets, often grab this bottle assuming they're getting Canadian maple at a discount. They're not. They're getting American corn syrup at a price that reflects exactly what's inside. Verdict from this investigation: avoid completely if your goal is maple. If you want sweet pancake topping, fine, but understand that the maple imagery is doing work it shouldn't be doing. Quick pause here. If this trace through the supply chain has been useful, the simplest thing you can do is share this video with the person in your life who buys the household groceries. That single action does more to clean up family pantries than any algorithm tweak. Now back to the work, because the next part is where it gets interesting. Let me tell you something. I grew up in a house where Sunday mornings smelled like butter on a hot pan and the slow drip of something my grandmother kept in a glass bottle on top of the fridge. She'd lift it down with both hands, set it on the table, and pour it in this slow, golden ribbon over the pancakes. I remember holding the bottle up to the kitchen window once when I was maybe 7 and watching the light come through the amber glass. It looked like sun in a jar. And the taste, that complex, slightly woody, slightly caramel, deeply sweet taste. It was nothing like the hollow sugar water sweetness of the corn syrup version a friend's mom had at her house. I didn't have the vocabulary for it then. I just knew one of them tasted like a forest and the other one tasted like nothing. That memory is what this whole investigation is built on, because there's an enormous difference between real maple and corn syrup in a maple-shaped bottle, and most Canadians have lost the ability to tell them apart in a blind taste because they've been drinking the fake version for so long. Here's the pivot. Everything in the avoid list above is some version of corn syrup pretending to be maple, or a brand name product whose pancake line shouldn't be confused with its pure maple line. What we're going to do now is look at 3 options that, in this investigation's view, deserve the maple name. These aren't paid placements. These are brands and producer categories that, when you trace the supply chain, end up at an actual tap in an actual tree in an actual sugar bush in Canada. Safe pick 1. Camp. Now, before any maple purist writes in, yes, Camp also makes some products that are blends and table syrups, and you have to read the label carefully. But the Camp Pure Maple Syrup line, sold in the distinctive small log cabin-shaped tin, is the real thing. The supply chain traces back to Quebec producers within the PPAQ system. The grading is federal. The ingredient list is one ingredient, pure maple syrup. The price reflects that. You're paying for sap that took roughly 40 liters to produce 1 liter of finished syrup, that was boiled down over hours, that was filtered, graded, and bottled under regulatory oversight. The taste, when you actually pour it slowly over a hot pancake and let it pool, has that woody complexity my grandmother's bottle had. Verdict. The Pure Camp line is a legitimate, accessible Canadian maple syrup at most grocery stores. Just verify you're buying the pure version, not the blend. Safe pick 2. Kirkland Signature Pure Maple Syrup from Costco. This one surprises people, because Kirkland is a house brand, and house brands historically meant compromise. In maple, that hasn't been the case. The Kirkland Pure Maple Syrup, sold in the large 1-liter glass bottle with the federal grade clearly displayed, is sourced from Quebec PPAQ producers and sold at a per milliliter price that's substantially below most boutique competitors. The supply chain has been verified by Costco's internal sourcing, audits, and by independent journalists who have toured the facilities. It's pure. It's graded. It's Canadian. The viscosity is the natural viscosity of boiled sap, not the engineered viscosity of cellulose gum. The slow pour is real. The amber color comes from the sugars caramelizing during the boil, not from caramel coloring added at the bottling line. Verdict. If you have a Costco membership and you go through enough syrup to justify the larger bottle, this is one of the best per dollar pure maple options in the country. Safe pick 3. Small Quebec producer cooperatives, sold under names like Coombs Family Farms in some markets, but more often available at farmers markets, on direct from the Sugar Bush websites, and at independent grocers across Quebec, Ontario, the Maritimes, and increasingly the Prairies. These are the bottles where the supply chain isn't just traceable, it's a single person you could call by name. The producer is part of the PPAQ quota system. The bottle has the federal grade printed clearly, often grade A amber or grade. A dark, depending on the time of season the sap was collected. Many carry the Produit du Québec certification mark, which adds another layer of verification. The ingredient list is one word: maple. The price is higher because the supply chain is shorter and the operation is smaller, but you're getting the actual product, often from a family that has been tapping the same trees for generations. Verdict. If you want the most direct supply chain possible, find a small Quebec producer or a cooperative bottle at a local market. It's the closest you can get to walking out into the sugar bush yourself. Now here's the part of this video that matters most, because none of this brand by brand analysis helps you if you can't apply the framework to a bottle I haven't mentioned. So here's how to verify any maple syrup, in any store, in under 30 seconds. First, read the ingredients. Pure maple syrup has one ingredient: maple syrup. If the list is longer than that, it's not pure maple. Full stop, regardless of what the front of the label says. Second, look for the federal grade. Real Canadian maple syrup is graded grade A golden, grade A amber, grade A dark, or grade A very dark. If there's no grade designation, it's not regulated as pure maple under the Canadian system. Third, check the price per milliliter. Real maple syrup costs roughly 4 to 10 times more than pancake syrup because real maple takes roughly 40 liters of sap to produce 1 liter of finished product. If the price seems too good to be true for maple, it's not maple. Fourth, lift the bottle. Real maple syrup is dense. A 250 milliliter bottle of pure maple weighs noticeably more than a 250 milliliter bottle of corn syrup-based pancake syrup, because the sugar content and density of true maple is higher. Fifth, the viscosity test, which you can do at home. Pour both side by side. Real maple flows in a steady, slow ribbon and clings slightly to the spoon. Corn syrup pancake syrup pours faster and has a slightly bouncier, gel-like quality from the cellulose gum. Sixth, look for the Produit du Québec certification, or any Provincial Maple Producer Association mark. These marks indicate the bottle has been verified as coming from within the regulated supply chain. Use any one of these checks and you'll catch the fakes. Use 2 or 3 together and you'll never buy fake maple again. So here's where this lands. You came into this video probably assuming that the maple syrup industry was straightforward, that a bottle on a Canadian shelf with a maple leaf on, it was, by some kind of national reflex, actual maple. You now know that isn't true. You know that corn syrup with caramel coloring has been sold beside pure maple for decades. You know the PPAQ controls a strategic reserve the size of a small lake. You know the 2012 heist proved how valuable real maple actually is. You know that the brands using the most cabin imagery often have the least cabin connection, and you know how to check in under 30 seconds whether the bottle in front of you is the real thing or a chemistry set imitation. That knowledge changes how you shop. It changes how you cook. It changes the Sunday morning ritual when your kids ask why. Your pancakes taste different at home than at their friend's house. The answer is that you stopped buying the fake. Now do this. Get up, walk to your kitchen, open the fridge or the pantry, find your syrup bottle, and read the ingredient list from the first word to the last. If it says maple syrup and nothing else, you're holding the real thing. If it says corn syrup, glucose fructose, cellulose gum, or caramel color anywhere on that list, you now know exactly what you've been pouring on your family's breakfast. The bottle is in your hand. The label is right there.